8 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. Pursuant to motion adopted by the House on May 26, 2020, Standing Order 1082, and the motion adopted on June 1st, 2020, the committee is proceeding to a briefing from the Minister and the officials on the government's response to the Big Bear landslide. Today's meeting is taking place by video conference. The proceedings are public and are made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware the webcast will show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. For the benefits of the members and also our minister and witnesses, I would like to remind all of you a few rules to follow. Interpretation in this video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. As you are speaking, if you plan to alternate from one language to the other, you will need to also switch the interpretation channel so it aligns with the language you are speaking. You may want to allow for a short pause when switching languages. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. Should members have a point of order, they should activate their mic and state that they have a point of order. If a member wishes to intervene on a point of order that has been raised by another member, I encourage him or her to use the raised hand function. In order to do so, you should click on participants at the bottom of the screen. When the list pops up, you will see next to your name that you can click raise hand. This will signal to the chair your interest to speak and will keep the names in a chronological order. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. The use of headsets is strongly encouraged. Should any technical challenges arise, for example, in relation to interpretation or a problem with your audio arises, please advise the chair immediately and the technical team will work to resolve them. Please note that we may need to suspend during these times as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Before we get started, can everyone click on their screen in the top right-hand corner and ensure they are on gallery view? With this view, you should be able to see all the participants in a grid view. It will ensure that all video participants can see one another. I would now, of course, like to welcome our witnesses. Today with us, we have the Honourable Bernadette Jordan, Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard. Welcome, Minister. And accompanying her today, we have Timothy Sargent, Deputy Minister, Jean-Guy Fergeron, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy, Jen O'Donoghue, Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer, Sylvain Lapointe, Assistant Deputy Minister, Fisheries and Harbour Management, Dominique Laporte, Assistant Deputy Minister, Human Resources and Corporate Services, Mario Pelletier, Commissioner, Canadian Coast Guard, Andy Smith, Deputy Commissioner, Strategy and Shipbuilding, and Rebecca Reid, Regional Director General, Pacific Region. Welcome each and every one of you again for attending. I know some of you have been here before. And of course, a big welcome to the Minister for making herself available for the 2 hours today. Minister Jordan, you have the floor for your opening remarks. 6 minutes or less, please.
Well, thank you very much and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with you today and to speak to the members of this committee as the Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard. I'd first like to congratulate you, Mr. MacDonald, on your election as chair and to the other members for serving on this very important committee. As you know, I've had the honor to not only serve on the committee, but to serve as chair. And I will say it was 3.5 years I enjoyed immensely working with you all. Je sais à quel point il sera important d'écouter.
I know that it will be important to hear members' advice. As we work together in the weeks, months, and years ahead, to manage challenges and identify opportunities in our fisheries and ocean sectors.
Invitation to discuss Canada's commitment to our salmon fisheries, and in particular, the measures we have taken and will continue to take under very difficult circumstances caused by COVID-19. With respect to the landslide also in the Fraser River at Big Bar in British Columbia. I am accompanied today, as you mentioned, by Deputy Minister Tim Sargent, Commissioner of the Coast Guard, Mario Pelletier, and many others. After my opening remarks, my officials and I will be happy to answer your questions. As you know, the Government of Canada is committed to building strong partnerships to help manage our salmon fisheries. This commitment was clearly demonstrated by an unprecedented emergency response last summer to mitigate the impacts of the landslide at Big Bar north of Lillooet, BC. We've been working hard and in close cooperation with the province of British Columbia and impacted First Nations. An incident command team, jointly led by the federal government, the government of British Columbia, and the First Nations governments, worked together over the summer to respond to this crisis. The work continued over the fall and this past winter and spring, supported by other departments and agencies, stakeholder groups, and geotechnical and hydrological experts. I would like to stress that this group of dedicated professionals and volunteers have put long hours into dealing with this very complex logistical challenge. In January, after request for proposal, Peter Kiewit and Sons was awarded a $17.6 million contract to work on rock remediation. This work involved building a road down the side of a mountain to gain access to the site to allow for removal of massive rocks. It involved water blasting of huge boulders so that they could remove obstructions and slow down the water flow. My first trip to BC as minister was to Big Bar in January, so I could see firsthand the progress and the work being done to address this critical slide. Initial blasting in February was followed by a second round of blasting, which began in March. Road work continues in order to secure overland access, and throughout the process, an archaeologist is working directly with 2 local First Nations, and they've been working hard to preserve the natural history of the site. We all hoped that the problem would be quickly resolved, but resolving the blockage has been a massive undertaking and is going to take considerable resources to address this adequately. Making sure we do everything possible to ensure the survival of these fish populations means we need to plan for every outcome and put mitigation measures in place. That's exactly what we're doing. As Minister, the protection, conservation, and restoration of our wild Pacific salmon stocks in British Columbia is an extremely important priority for me. My actions are guided by the Canada's Wild Salmon Policy Implementation Plan. This plan speaks to the importance of maintaining the biodiversities of these important stocks, as well as their significance to Indigenous people, commercial and recreational fish harvesters, and British Columbians overall. Nearly half of BC's Chinook salmon stocks are in decline, with the Fraser Chinook on the verge of collapse. More than ever, we need to ensure that our wild stocks are protected. The actions our government has taken to fully address the 75 recommendations of Justice Cohen's 2012 report on the Commission of Inquiry into the decline of the sockeye salmon in the Fraser River have been integrated into our ongoing habitat science, aquaculture, and fisheries management work. As members of this committee are well aware, we've made a good start, but we have much more work to do to protect our wild Pacific salmon. We're committed to working with the province of British Columbia to ensure that Pacific salmon strategies are coordinated, coherent, and connected. We collaborated closely to create the $142 million BC Salmon Restoration and Innovation Fund, a federal provincial cost-shared program funded jointly with the Government of British Columbia. This fund will support the fish and seafood sector in British Columbia to position itself for the long-term sustainability. We made an additional contribution of $5 million to the Pacific Salmon Endowment Fund to support the Pacific Salmon Foundation, which is doing incredible work and is an important voice in the development of plans and programming to protect and restore wild Pacific salmon and its habitat. We announced $15 million in additional annual funding to support stock assessments, coded wire tagging, and catch monitoring of Pacific salmon. These investments contribute to our obligations under the Canada-U.S. Pacific Salmon Treaty and are targeted towards better managing West Coast salmon fisheries. Lastly, we're investing $107 million to support the implementation of the renewed Fisheries Act, and that includes money for stock assessments for major fish stocks across Canada. As I mentioned at the outset, Indigenous and coastal communities have been and will continue to be on the front line of salmon conservation. We will continue to work with First Nations and other key stakeholders to improve our understanding of trends in salmon stocks, protect and conserve salmon habitats, and ensure the sustainability of Canada's salmon populations. Last August, my department released the State of the Pacific Salmon Report, the first ever overview of how salmon are responding to climate change, in which DFO scientists presented and discussed observations and research on Pacific salmon populations and their ecosystems. Over the next year and beyond, my department and I will expand our focus on these and other actions to preserve and rebuild Pacific salmon stocks with a real effort on measures to ensure that the salmon recover and thrive for future generations of Canadians. And with that, Mr. Chair, I am happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Minister. You were just a little tiny bit over, but we'll make up that time, I'm sure, along the way. We'll start off now with our questioning on the Conservative side. Mr. Arnold, for 6 minutes or less, please. You're on mute, Mr. Arnold. You're on mute.
Sorry, too many buttons. I had the one on my headset unmuted, but I guess the other one wasn't. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Welcome, Minister. Welcome back to FOPO. It's your first time back here as Minister after spending a few years both as a member and the chair. So welcome back. Minister, now that you've been the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans for half a year, I'd like to ask you, what do you consider to be the 4 or 5 greatest threats to the future of Fraser River salmon stocks?
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. And questions through the chair, correct? So, Mr. Chair, through you. First of all, Mr. Arnold, I appreciated working with you very much over the 3.5 years that I sat on the FOPO committee. So I'm looking forward to the discussions that we continue to have and the good relationships that we've continued to have over the past few years. I would say the number one, well, there's a number of different issues facing the Fraser River salmon stocks. The Big Bar landslide, of course, is one. It's a significant one. The landslide was a massive slide. It was the equivalent of 33 stories high and 17 stories wide. So we're talking about a significant impact on the Fraser River and on the ability of the stocks to move directly. Climate change is obviously a challenge for the salmon stocks. We're also very concerned, of course, with the with regards to the complete decline of the Chinook River, of the Chinook specifically. We're doing everything we possibly can to continue to address them. Of course, habitat restoration is going to be a challenge. Coastal restoration is a challenge as well. These are all things that we're actively working on to address the decline in the salmon stocks.
Thank you, Minister. According to DFO, the landslide occurred somewhere between October and November of 2018, about 14 months before Peter Kiewit was assigned the contract in the middle of January of 2020. Within this 14-month window, we saw about 2 months of activity in July and August of 2019, but then no work for restoration of the fish passage occurred until January of 2020. Current modeling has indicated that the salmon may not be able to pass the site when flows are high. They're expected to be high this year because of a high snowpack, and insufficient passage may be available to the fish. Does the department have a plan for what needs to be done next if the fish passage isn't happening naturally?
Thank you, Mr. Arnold, for the question, and through the chair to you. We have been actively working on remediation efforts since we heard about this slide. We were first notified it and automatically started working with communities, with the province, with the First Nations community to move salmon through the area as quickly as we could last summer. Unfortunately, some of the work had to be put on hold because of weather during the fall, high water levels, flooding. But then once Kiewit and Sons were hired, work began immediately, as well as continual planning that we were doing for the site. One of the things that we have done in order to mitigate the challenges is we've set up 2 working groups. And those 2 groups, basically what happens is as the work is being done, the groups are already working on next measures in case things don't work. So we're continually looking at how we can best go forward. We know that this is a huge undertaking. This was, as I said, a massive slide, and it's going to take a significant amount of work and resources in order to clear it. And we're continuing to look at different ways that we can mitigate those challenges that we're facing, and so that the Fraser River salmon can get through. We know how critically important those fish are to the communities as well as to the culture of British Columbia. So we continually look for other ways to address the concerns.
Does the department have a plan to restore the fish stocks that were basically wiped out because of the lack of passage last year? The nature of the Pacific salmon is they are a multi-year cycle. They only spawn once and then die. That spawning cycle that was lost last year will take years to recover. Has the department developed a plan to restore that lost stock from last year?
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. And we're continuing to look at both long-term and short-term plans and measures that are going to help in the recovery of the salmon stocks because of the Break Bar landslide. To help support the poor state of many of the upper Fraser River salmon, we're currently considering investigating emergency conservation enhancement options that include hatchery components. It's important that we continue to consider all of those options as we go forward, and we're committed to supporting the recovery of these fish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Time left?
25 seconds.
No. Are there any more overflights of the river taking place to ensure fish passage isn't blocked?
Right now, we have a number of different measures in place. We will start the whoosh system, or the pneumatic fish pump, is being built right now to get the fish over the passage, as well as a natural fish passageway. Those are just two of the measures. We're continuing to look at other ways that we can help support to make sure that the fish can get through this year.
Thank you. Now on to Mr. Hardy for 6 minutes or less, please.
And thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And it's good to see you, Minister Jordan. You used to just sit right next to me, and I'd get the benefit of your opinions up very close. In fact, it was good. Actually, I want to start at the most recent news that came out of this project, and then work back, and that had to do with the cost of it. We went in with a contract for Peter Kiewit and Sons of $17.6 million. The latest is it's going to be $52.5 million, and maybe even more. Are these cost overruns per se, or has the scope of the project changed?
These are not cost overruns. These are actually measures that we know have to be put in place. We knew right from the start that this was going to be a significant project. The first phase was the contract to Kiewit and Sons for the $17 million. We knew that we hoped that would do everything that it needed to do, but we knew right from the beginning that this was going to be a huge undertaking, that we will continue to find the ways necessary. We know, look, this is critical to make sure that these fish get through the passageway. This is something that we'll continue to work with the province as well as the First Nations communities, because we know how important it is to make sure that those fish get through.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we heard that there are estimates that the slide may have occurred around early November in 2018, and it wasn't even until, I guess, June last year that even the local communities had noticed something is wrong. What does this say about the need for, if you like, more constant and better monitoring of the state of the river?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to remember is this is an extremely remote location. This is somewhere that is not monitored on a regular basis. Even the local communities were not aware of the slide. But as soon as we were aware of it, we moved very quickly in order to address the challenges that we saw. And the boots on the ground work that was done by the people in the First Nations community, by DFO, by people from the province working to get the fish over the passageway last summer was very inspiring to see. Everybody came together with a common goal, and they knew it had to be done. And over 60,000 fish were moved manually by this group of people. And I think that just goes to show how critically important this is, and that people are willing to get on board and do whatever they have to do in order to make sure that the fish got through the passageway.
Well, speaking of boots on the ground, I understand the minister's boots were on the ground very early on in the process. A delightful visit to this area in January. So you had a firsthand look at the working conditions on top of the technical conditions of actually getting equipment down to the side of the river to do this work. Paint the picture, if you can, as to what you saw when you were there, and how cold was it?
It was probably the coldest I've ever been, actually, and when I've been outside. The trip to Big Bar, I will say that I was sworn in November, and I think the swearing in was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and by about 4:30 I'd heard about Big Bar. So this has been a priority for our department, for me since the very start. It was important for me to get there. I was fortunate enough to go with my parliamentary secretary, Terry Beach, to Big Bar to see firsthand the slide. It's a significant slide. I mean, it's almost unbelievable, and it's really quite awe-inspiring to see the amount of work that has to be done in order to clear that passageway. The slide itself was, as I said earlier, it was the equivalent of a 33 stories high and 17-story wide building. I actually got to meet with the First Nations communities while I was there, the chiefs from the First Nations communities. And they, like me at first, were like, well, why don't we just move the rocks? It's not just a matter of moving a few rocks. This is going to take a huge amount of effort in order to clear that passageway. And it's been really quite a good story to tell, actually, about the amount of work that we've been able to do in cooperation with the First Nations communities there and the province to make sure that we clear that passageway.
Well, we know that last year, or actually, no, pardon me, I guess when we recognized that there was an obstruction and there was work done to get salmon around the obstruction, that a number of things were tried, scooping them up, trucking them up above the obstruction, etc. But we understand that the survival rate of the fish that went through some of these processes was not good at all. Given that there's still an obstruction there, have there been any estimates as to actually how many successful transplants are we going to be able to accomplish around this barrier?
So last year we were able to move 60,000 fish with help, and then 220,000 got through on their own. We are continuing to work now with what's known as the whoosh system, or the pneumatic fish pump, which we feel will have significant impacts on being able to move more fish, as well as a natural fish passageway that's also being constructed at this point. And I don't know, maybe Deputy, if you have anything you would like to add there with regards to what we're expecting to see go through this summer.
I'll actually pass it on to our RDG from Pacific.
Yes, so I can provide a response to that. So what we're expecting this year is relatively low returns of Chinook stocks and sockeye as well. And so we aren't expecting a lot of fish to come through, but we are ready for enhancement measures so that when the fish arrive, we'll be able to support them and take them to some hatchery facilities to ensure maximum spawning success.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Hardy. Now, Madam Gill, I understand you're giving your time to Mr. Arnold for the 6 minutes. Okay, Mr. Arnold, when you're ready, please. And I just want to remind participants that when you're not speaking, please have your mic muted. If it's after you do your round of questioning or before, make sure it is muted, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, Minister, what plans are in place to deal with the recovery of those lost stocks? What's going to be taking place in the next 6 months, the next year, the next 2 years to recover those stocks that were hit so hard last year? We know that it's the very early runs that have the most difficult time getting through.
Thank you for the question. And our government, as I said, we're considering measures both short-term and long-term to help with the recovery of the stocks. We know that there's going to be a poor state for many of the upper Fraser River salmon, so we're looking at emergency conservation enhancement measures, including the hatchery component. And I will say that as of June 3rd, the holding facility is already in operation, but we're also continuing to consider all options when it comes to the recovery of these stocks. And I'm not sure, Deputy, if there's anything else there that maybe you would like to add.
Rebecca, over to you.
Yes, so we do have a number of mitigation measures in place. Of course, the first thing we want to do is restore natural fish passage. And so the measures that the minister has referred to will greatly support that. But in addition to that, we've got our hatchery facilities, the temporary storage, and we've got plans to to move fish to hatchery facilities. In addition to that, though, for the longer term, we're undertaking a study to look at the enhancement needs above the big bar slide, and doing a study to see what kind of measures need to be put into place to provide that longer term support for those fish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it's okay, I would like to pass this. I didn't realize it was supposed to be the blocks right now. I believe this time was supposed to go to Mr. Fast, so I'd like to pass that time on, the remaining time on to Mr. Fast.
When you're ready, Blaine. Ed, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Minister, you mentioned that you visited the big bar slide. You mentioned boots on the ground. So you know that rock slides are actually common along the Fraser River. And DFO was made aware of the big bar landslide in June of 2019. However, based on satellite imagery, I believe the slide occurred between October and November of 2018. So we lost precious time in getting remediation in place, perhaps 6 to 8 months of lost time. So I'm assuming that DFO does regularly monitor the Fraser River for slides. Is that correct?
That is correct. We do surveillance when there is fishing going on. So we would have, if there was no fishing at that time, we would not have been monitoring it at that time for the slide. We only found out, once we found out about the slide, we quickly acted on what we had learned and started work right away to mitigate the challenges that we were facing from the slide.
How much does DFO actually use satellite imagery to monitor what's happening along the Fraser Canyon?
I'm going to refer that question to my deputy, please.
Again, Rebecca?
Yes. So first of all, just from an aerial surveillance perspective, we do have regular aerial surveillance that goes on up and down the river when there is fishing taking place. From a satellite perspective, that is technology that we are using more and more. I think it is something that we will move to be able to use more effectively. And so I would see that as further development down the road.
Could you see expanding the number of overflights that take place outside of fishing seasons, at least on an occasional basis, to make sure that slides like this don't go unnoticed and those delays create significant challenges to the survival of our salmon?
As I've said, Mr. Fast, through you, Mr. Chair, we're taking a number of things into consideration when we look at future how we're going to deal with this Fraser River. So I'm sure that that's one of the things that we could consider as well, and we will look at.
And could we ask you to report back to the committee on what additional steps are being taken to ensure that we get a timely notice of any slides that occur so that remediation can take place if necessary?
Yes.
Thank you. As you know, the wild salmon on the West Coast are facing an existential threat. You mentioned the Chinook, but a timely response to many of these issues is critical. I noticed you referenced the Cohen Commission report, and I wanted to know from you how many of the recommendations of the Cohen Commission have you actually fully responded to? In other words, completed your responses? How many are still outstanding?
As of 2018, Fisheries and Oceans Canada has acted on all 75 recommendations out of the Cohen Commission report. We recognize that acting on many of the recommendations is ongoing as well as incremental. Many commitments to ongoing actions are reflected in the Wild Salmon Policy of 2018 to 2022 Implementation Plan, which outlines specific activities and approaches that will be led by the department towards restoring, maintaining the healthy diversity. Yes,
Minister,
I'm still talking. You asked me a question. I'm trying to answer it.
I'm sorry. This is my time. And I didn't want you to read talking points. I just wanted a simple response. How many of those recommendations you had responded to? And you mentioned that you had taken action on all of them. We've gone through those recommendations, and there are many that both the commercial fishing industry and the recreational angling industry would say have not been acted upon. They may have been reviewed, there may have been a written response, but action has actually not been taken. So,
and as I was saying,
excuse
Mr.
me,
Fast.
Mr. Fast, your time has gone way over.
All right.
Perhaps the minister can respond later or provide some answers in writing at a later date.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
And now to Mr. Jans for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here today. And I want to thank the department for also bringing me and our former colleague, Finn Donnelly, to Big Bar so we could see firsthand the challenge that does exist there. We know that some of the stocks were weak before the Big Bar slide, Minister, and I just want to hear, do you have a clear plan on how you're going to activate recovery actions for salmon that were affected by Big Bar, but also those other weak Fraser River salmon stocks?
Thank you for the question. As I've said, we are looking at a number of different measures to deal with the Fraser River salmon stocks, particularly because of the Big Bar landslide. We're investigating emergency conservation enhancement options that include the hatchery. We have actually already started with. The holding facility is now open for that operation. We, of course, with the renewal of the Fisheries Act, have also committed to building stocks as well as rebuilding plans. Those are all things that are ongoing. There's a number of different challenges facing salmon, as well as things like habitat restoration is one, which we're working with the BC Shrift program on with communities engaged in that, as well as coastal erosion. So there's a number of different measures we're taking to help protect those stocks.
I'd love to dive in just on some questions around that. You talked about hatcheries, and we know that there are a number of DFO-operated hatcheries in BC, but there's none, to my understanding, that are in the middle or upper Fraser, where the salmon that were affected by Big Bar reside. Is there, if there were hatchery facilities in that area, they could be used to help accelerate the recovery of these impacted populations? What is the plan around that, Minister?
There is actually a plan around using hatcheries for the upper Fraser River. I could maybe turn that over to the deputy to further address that question.
Yep. Rebecca, I think you're best placed to answer that.
Yes. So there is a study underway right now, a feasibility study, to look at the existing infrastructure that's available above the Big Bar site from a hatchery perspective, and what it would take, the cost to invest in those facilities to support the enhancement activities. And so there definitely is some work underway that's already started to respond to that exact question. And
Super. Is there a commitment from the department to accelerate that project just in light of the crisis that we're in?
Our commitment right now is to do everything we can to mitigate the challenges we're facing because of Big Bar. Those are, those are all parts of that solution. We want to make sure that we do everything we can so there's natural passage of fish, but we will be looking at other measures to make sure that we're addressing the ongoing challenges with the reduced stocks.
You talked about habitat and the BC Shrift program. Our understanding, and again, just back to Finn Donnelly, who is now the chair of Rivershed Society, and many of the organizations working in the Fraser, they're saying that we need about $250 million just for the Fraser, and I think coastal people believe we need about $500 million in restoration just in the next 5 years. Right now, the $148 million falls quite far short of what's needed. Can we get a commitment from you that you're going to do what's needed to bring our stocks back in terms of restoration and habitat protection?
Sorry, I'm having a hard time unmuting my mic. I apologize. I will tell you that, we have worked very closely with the...
You're muted.
You're muted, Minister.
I apologize. I'm not sure why that keeps happening. I will say that as you are aware, that the BC Shrift Fund is a program that we jointly manage with the province of British Columbia. We are currently, we have over $70 million worth of projects already approved. We're continuing to assess projects on a regular basis. We know that there's a lot that needs to be done for the salmon stocks, but we do need to work with the province in order to make sure that we are able to continue with this program.
I appreciate that. And in my writing, I know many applications were denied. So in terms of coastal people and the people that are out there doing the volunteer work, mainly recreation fishers, they're saying that this is necessary, and they feel like the government is not investing even close to what's necessary. You talked about the Cohen Commission. I appreciate you bringing that up, and implementation of the recommendations. Certainly, we know that Justice Cohen said that open net aquaculture has a significant impact on Fraser River stocks, especially sockeye. We know that right now we're seeing record amounts of sea lice. Still open net fish farms with PRV and disease-infected fish, massive die-offs that we've seen recently, and the government still hasn't come up with a plan to move to closed containment. When will that plan happen, and when will the implementation of that plan take place?
We're continuing, and as you know, Mr. Johns, my mandate letter was very was clear on moving from open net to closed containment. We are continuing to do the consultation process. As you are aware, this is something that's extremely important to First Nations communities as well as the BC government. We're working in collaboration, in consultation with them.
I would argue it wasn't
things.
very clear, that mandate letter, because they expected that you'd be moving to closed containment by 2025.
We're continuing to work with the First Nations communities that are going to be impacted with going forward, and we're finding solutions as we go.
Thank you for that, Mr. Johns. We'll go on now to the second round. Mr. Calkins, for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. I trust you can hear me okay. Minister, on March 10th, basically 3 months ago today, I asked officials at the committee about the status of the mothballed hatcheries that are on the Fraser and whether or not they could be stood up to help preserve the genetic material or genetic populations that are at risk right now. So, Minister, what I would like to know, and I'm assuming that you'll have to hand this off to your officials, Ms. Reid responded to that question and said that they're looking at it. She said today that they're still looking at it or studying it. I actually want to know where that's at. Is it feasible to get Quesnel and Eagle River up and running again? And if you're looking at hatchery solutions and it's not Quesnel or Eagle River, then where is it?
Yeah, I am actually going to turn that over to my deputy.
Yep. Rebecca, what's the latest on that?
Yes. So we do have a plan in place to do that work. And as I said, it has started, but it is going to take some time. There would be some, even if all kind of systems go, some significant infrastructure investments needed, those types of things. So it is not an immediate plan by any means. We're starting on it immediately, but the results will take a couple of years. I would like to add, though, there are some existing facilities that are being used this year, for example, in Vanderhoof and at Quesnel, that are being used in addition to the DFO facility. So there is work underway to support those fish this year.
Are you talking about non-DFO hatcheries? Are you talking about community-based hatcheries that are able to help? Is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Were they not already at full capacity, Ms. Reid? Or
so we've been working with the Freshwater Fish Society, so Go Fish in Vanderhoof, Spruce City Wildlife, Quesnel River Research Center. They're all being utilized. We're working with them actively to make sure there's room for the fish to support the enhancement activities.
How much new capacity are we talking about this year?
I'll have to look up the numbers for you, but that's something I could get back to you on, specific numbers.
I'd sure like to know that. We know that salmon survival, and Minister, in your opening comments, you were asked by Mr. Arnold about your 5 priorities. I noticed that fishing regulation changes and predator control wasn't in your list. I hope that you'll take a look at that. The Sport Fishing Institute, the Sport Fishing Advisory Boards on the West Coast are all talking about mark selective fisheries in order to make sure that it's primarily hatchery fish that are retained. And the Sport Fishing Advisory Board's report indicates that changes could be made to support the Fraser River stocks while still allowing more than adequate catches of those stocks that are not at risk. Are you taking that report seriously? And are we going to move to mark selective fisheries? Because if we're going to ramp up hatcheries in order to save some of the genetics of these populations above the big bar, in order to, and you mentioned it in your opening comments, if we're going to be doing exactly what the Americans do, because the Americans, I believe, mark virtually every fish that comes from a hatchery, And we do not mark every fish. I'm guessing we mark about 10% of our fish, whether it's coated wire tags or clipping the adipose fin. If we're going to ramp up hatcheries in order to protect or preserve some of these genetic stocks, I hope we're looking at ramping up marking these fish. Can you clarify where that's at?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Calkins, for the question. Marked selective fisheries is definitely something we are looking at. It is not the silver bullet, though, that's going to save the salmon stocks. There are also a number of questions that need to be answered around a marked selective fishery before it's something that we can go ahead with. We are continuing to work with the groups. I want to particularly thank the Sport Fishing Association for talking to me about this fishery and their ideas, which I think were very, very good. There is, like I said, still a lot of questions with regards to things like data collection, with regards to, impacts on the wild Pacific salmon, with regards to First Nations, consultations with them about a marked selective fishery and how it impacts their fishery. There's a number of things that need to be addressed before this is something that we can move to in a big way, but it is definitely something that we are looking at seriously.
Minister, you're aware that on the West Coast, in particular, there are a lot of lodges and outfitters and guides that depend heavily on this resource. And given the fact that last year's regulatory changes were particularly hard on and had an economic impact on these businesses, and now the closures of COVID and the continuation of those regulations are compounding an already bad problem. When your assistant was at the meeting here a little while ago, he made a comment to suggest that the department's primary looking at or focus has been dealing with parts of the fish and seafood community that are directly in the business of regulating and basically commercial fishing. So do you, Minister, believe that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans should be actively involved in making sure that these lodges and these recreational or these sport fishing organizations and businesses are also at the table? And are they not part of the mandate of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans?
Sorry, Mr. Calkins, you've gone way overboard, Minister. If it's possible, if you don't get to answer this question, could you provide the answer in writing to the committee, please?
Yes, thank you.
We'll now go on to Mr. Waller for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to join the FOPO committee today and to talk about and ask questions about an issue that's very much top of mind for people all over BC, but certainly in coastal areas. Like many other people, I've been following the regular bulletins on what's happening with Big Bar, and I was wondering if you could mention why DFO chose to have these types of regular bulletins, and if this is something that the ministry does for other projects.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. I would say the regular bulletins have been extremely important for the people in the communities as well as for the people in British Columbia. As you are well aware, the salmon population is something that's critically important to BC, not only as a fishery but also as a culture. So keeping people informed about what was happening at Big Bar was something that we felt was extremely important to do. And I don't know, Deputy, if you have anything else you would like to add to that.
Not much, just to say that, of course, we talk to the public about a variety of the things that we do, but given the significance of Big Bar, this is one where we've done more in terms of communicating Big Bar and the work that we've done there over kind of a longer period of time than certainly I can recall in my time here.
And I was very grateful for the opportunity to speak with officials a few months ago on the same topic, and so I don't want to go back to measures that were happening before that. But I was hoping, Minister, if you could explain a little bit about the type of fish monitoring that's happening in and around the Big Bar slide site, and what's being done to monitor the fish migration upstream.
Okay, so we monitor for fish in two ways: above water and above and below. We use the hydroacoustic monitoring and sonar technology to count the number of salmon successfully passing through the slide. And we also use radio tagging, which involves inserting a tag into the fish's stomach and attaching it to their back. So the radio tag emits a signal and it's detected on shore, and it can give us a better idea of how many fish are actually going through. But I am going to turn that one over to the deputy as well, because it's a little bit, it's quite technical.
Yeah, and I think in turn I'll pass that one to Rebecca, who has those technical details at her fingertips.
Well, I think that's actually a really great answer. So we do the tagging studies, and we have the sonar to measure the fish as they pass through the site. We also will look on the spawning grounds as well to see how many fish have made it to the spawning grounds. And similarly, in the spring, we'll look to see how many of the fry have emerged or the smolts have come down. We do that to some extent as well. So we have a number of different methods to test and evaluate the number of fish in the area coming into the Fraser and leaving as well.
And I read in a recent bulletin that there was a couple of salmon that had been identified near the site, and I'm wondering, when did the salmon start arriving this year, and how has that increased to today?
And so far, only 2 Chinook have been detected on site. That's not unusual, apparently, at this time of year, and we're working hard to make sure we get the work done before the fish arrive. That was always a priority for us, is to do as much as we could, as quickly as we could before the fish arrive. But I don't know, Deputy, if there's anything else there that you want to add. But for my understanding, there has not been any fish arriving yet.
That's correct, Minister. Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
And given that there's been a number of delays this year because of very adverse weather conditions, what risks does this delay have to the timeline for the fish arriving?
So we're continuing to monitor, of course, the fish or for the fish as they come forward, and we're continuing to build the whoosh system, get that in place, as well as the natural fish passageway. This is like I've said, an unprecedented slide. It's something that we've all been all hands on deck since day one to make sure that we can get fish through as quickly as possible. We recognize how important it is to the communities in the area, as well as to BC, and to the fish population. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything possible. And of course, putting the whoosh system, we have been faced with challenges because of weather, because of high water. And I'm not sure if there's anything else there, Deputy, that we wanted to add to some of the challenges.
Just to say, particularly this time of year, the water is quite muddy. It's often hard to detect the fish. We do have a fish wheel there, though that's helping with that. The whoosh system is installed. It's ready to go when we start to see significant numbers of fish coming in.
Great. And has there been any fish mortality that's been detected this year as a result of the blasting and other activities that are taking place at the site?
I am not aware of any, but there again, I think I would turn that one to Deputy.
Yeah, none that we're aware of.
Great. Minister, you mentioned earlier in your responses that you'd set up 2 working groups as part of the response to Big Bar, and I'm wondering how have experts been involved in these working groups, and how has their advice informed the decisions that have taken place to date?
We've had a number of, as I said, we've had these 2 working groups that have been there since, I believe, late December, early January. They work together to find the best ways forward in case things don't go as planned. We want to make sure that we're not waiting until we find out if things are working before we have the next measures in place. We're going to continue to work with them. We have a number of different professionals on site who are working with the First Nations community. We have an archaeologist there to make sure that we're keeping the land as it should stay. We have, of course, a significant number of engineers. The people from Kiewit have been exceptional in terms of keeping us posted on what they're doing. And I'm not sure, Deputy, if you have anything else you wanted to add there?
No, that's pretty complete, Minister.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Chair, how much longer do I have in my time here? All right, I'm going to keep going then. So a lot of the measures that have been discussed for Big Bar have really been short-term focused. What type of long-term solutions is DFO considering to enable fish to pass through the site over the long term?
I think the ultimate goal would be to clear it enough so that it's a natural passageway for the fish, so that it's not something that we have to continually monitor or maintain. Barring that, we will continue to make sure that there is a a natural like fish passageway there for the salmon to get through, as well as the whoosh system this year in order to help make sure that we get as many through as possible. But I think ultimately what the primary goal would be is to clear it enough so that we don't have to maintain it and we don't have to be concerned about it, but we just we'll continue to work towards that. But in the meantime, we are making sure that there are measures in place to get the fish through.
Great. And I understand that some of the different short-term measures will be viable under different flows of water. And I know the fishway, the natural fishway, is going to require a certain level of flow of water. And I'm wondering if it's expected this summer, given the high water flow we've had to date, if what level of confidence do we have that the flow of the water is going to make the natural fishway viable?
I'm going to turn that over to the deputy.
Yeah, I mean, it's always tricky to predict the water levels. It depends on so many factors. We're just going to be ready for whatever happens. We have the natural fishway, we have the whoosh system, and we're ready to use some of the other procedures that we used last summer, using trucks or even helicopter transport, just depending on what the level of that water is going to be. And of course, we don't know yet how effective the blasting has been, and to what extent the fish will be able to move naturally, or whether they're going to need some assistance.
Great. And if in the event that
I am sorry, I will have to intervene because the chair asked to ask the vice chair to take the chair. Est-ce que Madame Gill peut prendre la parole?
Can Madame Gill speak? The interpreter doesn't hear Madame Gill.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
That from the French channel, Ms. Gill. Pouvez-vous dire pardon, Madame Gill?
Madame Gill, can you go on the French channel? Madame Gill's microphone doesn't seem to be on.
Du plancher?
The interpreter cannot hear Madame Gill.
Should I repeat what she just said? I think it was not very loud.
I can do it better.
Je peux faire mieux. I'm sorry. So I'll replace the chair for a few minutes. I'll let Mr. Arnold, you have the floor. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Minister, considering the value of this contract has nearly tripled from the spending, and the estimates for this year seem to be overshot already. Either the scope or the cost of the work at Big Bar was underestimated. What steps are in place to set achievements, or what achievables are there, and how can we, what is being done to make sure that this project is properly costed and that there's a better assessment moving forward?
Thank you, Mr. Arnold, for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. I would not say this is over cost. We initially put $17 million into the remediation efforts, knowing that if that was not enough, we would have to continue on with more. We're going to continue to make investments as required for this critical initiative. We have to take all the steps possible in order to clear this way. I mean, this is significant to the communities that it serves, and we're going to make sure that we do everything we have to do in order to make sure that those salmon population can move. It's taking some time and some effort and some money, but we know that this is critical to the people of British Columbia, to the salmon stocks, to the First Nations communities in the area, and we're going to continue to do what we need to do in order to make sure that those salmon pass through.
So is there an estimate on what the total cost of this project is going to be, or is it simply ongoing and under, continuously under reassessment?
we're continuing to work to make sure that we mitigate the challenges faced by Big Bar. Those are, right now we are working with Kiewit to clear the way as quickly as possible. The whoosh system is getting put in place. The natural fish passageway is getting put in place. We need to make sure that we do everything we can to address the concerns. Ultimately, the goal is to clear the area enough so that it's a finished project. But until that time, and until we have that done, we will continue to make sure that we're investing where it needs to be.
Thank you. Very quickly, has the whoosh system been tested on large fish the size of the Chinook that pass up the Fraser River?
Deputy,
Yes,
can I pass that to you, please?
Yep, Rebecca.
So we have been working with the contractor for the whoosh system, and they have provided us assurance that the system will work. There's variable different sizes of tubes that are used for the body of the fish, and the tubes that we have are appropriate for the types of fish sizes that we have, and so we have full confidence that it will work.
Thank you. Minister, through you, Madam Chair, Minister, apart from the rock slide that occurred overnight in early May, have there been any other incidents of rock fall, either during or outside work hours at the work site?
I believe there was a small slide that was outside of work hours in May. Deputy, I think I believe it was 2 cubic meters or something like that. Deputy, maybe you can take that question.
Yeah, actually, I'll pass it on to our Chief Financial Officer, Jenna Donoghue, who's been following this closely.
Yes, Chair. There was one incident. It happened when there were no workers on site, and it was investigated, and some remediation has happened since then, but it happened when workers were not on site.
Thank you. I take it if the workers had been on site, it would have been a different situation. Minister, you mentioned the Fisheries Act review, and I noted on the timeline that there was some delay in looking at the review of the Fisheries Act and the work with in-water blasting and removal of rock. How much time of a delay was there from the Fisheries Act review before work started moving forward? And what other issues caused delays in moving forward with actual work on the Big Bar project?
I would say that one of the major reasons for the delay on the work was because of the water flow, was because of the floods that were happening in the area in the fall of 2018. But Deputy, if there's anything else that I've missed there, can you add to it, please?
No, I would say that is the key reason.
Thank you. And so what clear path does the department have to activate recovery plans for those salmon stocks that have been affected? We keep hearing you're planning to plan, and that seems to be a mantra. We need to know if there's definite action taking place on the ground.
Actually, I believe, Mr. Arnold, what was said was that we've already started with the enhancement programs with the hatchery and the Upper Fraser, that is already working as a holding facility for the fisheries. We are also undertaking a number of different measures with regards to habitat restoration outside of the Fraser River, but in general in British Columbia. The BC Shrift Fund has spent over $70 million to make sure that we're dealing with a lot of the challenges that are facing the stocks. We're also, of course, have management measures that we put in place to deal with the stock assessment. We also have, and we'll continue to look at a lot of different ways that we can help. But we know that there's a lot of challenges facing the BC salmon right now, and we're working diligently to find the answers for those challenges.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Arnold. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you back. Now that we've had these number of months to look at Peter Kiewitt's work, get an idea of the logistical challenges of getting things set up so they could even start to do the work. But now that we've been in there, blowing up boulders and moving things around, what's the estimate of how much more time it's going to take until the passageway is open and as much back to normal as possible?
I think that one of the things I need to talk about here is the magnitude of the work that has been done so far with regards to getting to the site in general. This is, as I said, an extremely remote area. We had to put roadways in order to be able to move boulders. We've had to put in, Kiewit has done phenomenal work in terms of getting us to that point. If I had an answer, Mr. Hardy, on when it was going to be done, I would just, I'd be so thrilled. But right now, it's all hands on deck every day to try and make sure that we clear the passage, to make sure that we put measures in place to mitigate the challenges that we see facing the salmon in the area. And I don't know, Deputy, if you have anything else that you would like to add there, but I know that we are working extremely hard to do as much as we can to get it done as quickly as we can.
Just to add that, as the Minister said, we're doing enhancement, habitat restoration, fisheries management measures that we instituted last summer, and we're looking at more this summer. So we're working very hard on all fronts. But the reality is we won't know what the results of the rock blasting work that we did over the winter will actually be until the summer, and the fish come back and we can actually observe the fish, see if they're getting over. And even then, there'll be a bit of a lag because we have to count how many are actually able to get over, and that takes a little while to get that information. And that's why we need to have Plan B, Plan C, Plan D all ready to go, because we have a very strong commitment to ensuring that fish can ultimately get over that barrier.
Well, when we look at pictures of the scene, it's very obvious the challenge of getting the work done. But when you also look at the pictures of the scene, there are a lot of menacing cliffs that are sitting there. We understand that this may have been a seismic event as opposed to, the normal freeze and thaw, which can, of course, cause pieces of cliff to break away. But nonetheless, has an assessment been done, up and down that stretch of the river to see if there are other rock faces that are ready to fall in?
Deputy, I'm going to turn that one to you.
I mean, that's a hugely complicated exercise. We're doing a lot of studies right now to understand, the impact of this on fish stocks. This was a particularly difficult place for us, just given its very remote location, and it's not an area where anyone is around during a good part of the year. In terms of kind of seismic, that kind of analysis, obviously from a DFO standpoint, that's not expertise that we have. Our expertise is around fish, biology more generally. That would be more for NRCan on the federal side, but particularly I think the province of British Columbia and their Department of Forestry and Lands. And I will say that we have been working very closely with the province of British Columbia on all of this, as has been said. They are actually responsible for the rock. I mean, the water and the things that move in the water are things that we're responsible for. They've been paying for a significant part of our efforts on Big Bar, including the blasting. And so that's a question that we would very much want to work with them on, as well as Indigenous partners.
Yeah, with respect, sir, I guess the fundamental question is there a present risk that we're going to get another slide from the adjacent rock faces? Do we know?
Geologists are not very good at predicting seismic events.
Okay, no, fair enough. The Watershed Watch people were very complimentary, by the way, of the work that's gone on, but they're less than complimentary of the long-term management of Pacific salmon. And this committee is going to, I think, invest a fair amount of time. Are you aware, for instance, Minister, that there are a lot of other obstructions, but they come in the form of flood mitigation up and down the river that's cut off countless numbers of small streams that salmon used to use?
There are a number of challenges facing the BC salmon populations, everything from, as you said, the flood challenges, the climate change with regards to, habitat is definitely a significant challenge for the salmon. We are taking a number of steps. There is no silver bullet to fix the challenges we're facing with salmon populations. I actually look forward to your committee doing a study to see what some of the things you think can be done, because we are working around the clock to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to protect the salmon population, to grow the numbers. As I said, the Fisheries Act has talked about rebuilding stocks. Those are all things that we're working on now. But there needs to be more done in terms of how we go forward to best protect these stocks. But so I look forward to your committee doing some work on that and giving us some ideas on how that can best go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Your time is up. Now I know we're supposed to go to Madame Gill, but I think she's agreed to share her time to Mr. Jans. And I will say a big thank you to Madame Gill for filling in for me a few moments ago. Really appreciate that. So when you're ready, Gord, for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, can you clarify I have 2.5 and then 2.5?
Yes, you do.
Okay, super. I just want to return to the question that I didn't have enough time to finish. Minister, you had made a commitment. There was a commitment from the Prime Minister in the mandate letter to you to work with the province of British Columbia and Indigenous communities to create a responsible plan to transition from open net pen salmon farming in coastal British Columbia waters by 2025 and begin work to introduce Canada's first ever Aquaculture Act. British Columbians were, expecting that the government was going to commit to moving from open net salmon farming by 2025, not a plan. Can you clarify that it's a plan or a commitment to move to closed containment by 2025? Because people are wondering, and there was many Liberal candidates in the last election that stated that it was a commitment to actually move to closed containment by 2025.
We're committed to moving to closed containment. That is something that was in our mandate. We're working now diligently with the province as well as with the First Nations communities. Of course, in the context of COVID-19, some things have had to be put on hold for a while to make sure that we do this right. It's something that, we know is important to the people of British Columbia, but we also recognize that open pen aquaculture is extremely important to some of our coastal communities in terms of the First Nations communities there that rely heavily on it for their economic survival. So we can't do this unless we do it in collaboration and in consultation with these organizations. That's what we're going to do. That's what we're committed to, and that's what we've already started the process.
I guess I'm just still not getting the answer. Is it a commitment to a plan, or is it a commitment to be, at closed containment by 2025? And you talk about things put on hold. I'll tell you what's not put on hold is the sea lice epidemic that's going on right now. The massive die-offs in aquaculture that are impacting our wild stocks. The transfer of diseased fish to open net salmon farms and the impact they're having on our wild stocks. But I just want to get clarity. Is it a plan or is it a commitment to move to closed containment?
We are working extremely hard with our First Nations communities and with the province of BC in order to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to move to closed containment. We know that there are many communities that rely on open net pens in order as their economic drivers. We are working with them to figure out the best ways forward, and we will continue to do that work.
In regards to the Kiewit contract, with respect to the contract that was awarded to them, my understanding is that one of the stipulations of the contract was that qualified local Indigenous workers were to be hired when available. I've heard from a local company who were set to be hired by Kiewit, but they were canceled at the very last minute. What enforcement mechanisms does the department have to ensure that qualified local Indigenous workers are hired? And also, in what ways have the work and guidance of elders and knowledge keepers been incorporated into the day-to-day operations on the site?
I'm going to turn that question over to the deputy, please.
I will say that it is a number one priority for us to ensure that Indigenous peoples are involved in the Big Bar remediation effort. We've made sure they're involved in the incident command room, for instance, and when the contracts were put together, it was very important for us that they be part of that. I'm going to ask our CFO, Jen Donoghue, who's been very much involved in the procurement process, to comment on some of those details.
So thank you. I think it is a very important part of the work that Kiewit is doing. We have asked them that they have a benefits plan in place. We do monitor it very closely, and if there are any concerns that come up through engagement with our First Nations communities, we make sure we are raising that. We do have weekly meetings with Kiewit, and if there are concerns, we make sure that they are dealt with as quickly as possible.
Ms. Donahue, we want to work with you to make sure we're bringing those to your attention if we could, because there is concerns. It's also been difficult for the public to know what's going on in certain areas and rationale decisions. The department certainly has been more accessible of late. I've got to give you lots of credit on that. But there's been suggestions that an independent advisory panel that reports to the minister has been suggested as a way to provide additional public confidence in the response. This would also help have some oversight of over those contract concerns I just shared with you. Is this something that the minister would consider?
I think we've been very open and transparent about what has been happening at Big Bar since the inception. We put out weekly bulletins. We engage with stakeholders, with the communities that are in the areas to make sure that they feel that they've been well informed. I've kept in touch actually with the MP from the area to make sure that he feels that he's gotten the information he needs, as well as anyone who's reached out to us. DFO has been extremely responsive, and it's in answering questions as they come forward. But Deputy, I'm not sure if there's anything else there that needs to be added.
Just simply that we do have a joint steering committee. First Nations are involved, and as was talked about earlier, we have had a very, very high level of communications activity on this file.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Johns. Your full 5 minutes has expired. Now we'll go to Mr. Bragdon, and I understand, Mr. Bragdon, you may be sharing your time, so I'll leave that decision up to you as you go through your questioning. You can just indicate you'll now share the rest of your time with whoever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the fellow members on the call here today, and welcome, Minister. And just have a couple of questions, and I'll be turning it over to Mr. Calkins. Minister, or I should say through you, Mr. Chair, how many salmon are estimated to have died in 2019 as a result of their migration route being impeded by the landslide and the subsequent stress?
I am going to turn that question to the Deputy.
Yep, Rebecca, I think you have those numbers at your fingertips.
Yes. Okay, so first of all, just to say about, as the minister said, about 60,000 fish were helicoptered over the site, and 220,000 migrated through the slide. For the most part, we lost at the early stages almost the entire stock. For the early Stewart ones, it was about 99%. For the early Chinook, it was about 89%. As the season went along, things improved. And so there was, particularly at the beginning, almost a complete loss of the fish and poor survival as a result.
Are you, Mr. Chair, are they expecting similar mortality rates this year, or what percentage improvement will it be over last year? Do we have any estimates on that yet?
Of course, this year we're going to have different processes in place in order to help make sure that the salmon get through. With the pneumatic fish pump, with the natural passageway, I think that the idea is that more fish would be able to get through. We are also willing to have people on the ground doing the transport like we did last year. But maybe, Deputy, I'm not sure if there's more there that you can add, but I know that this year is the plan is to significantly increase the amount of fish that do get through.
Okay, thank you. I'll yield the rest of my time to Mr. Calkins.
Deputy's mic was off.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry, just to say that we do expect better performance this year. We have a lot more measures in place. Even last year, once we were actually able to set up a way to transport some fish, we did see some better numbers. But the reality is we aren't going to know until the fish show up and we can observe them. Just because we know we've done a lot of blasting, we've seen the rocks have been removed, but how that affects the hydrology, how that affects the ability of salmon to actually get over that barrier. I mean, we have some modeling that we've done, but the reality is we won't really know until the fish show up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, it seems to me like we're not getting answers to the question about whether or not the harvest reductions have actually succeeded from last year and this year. based on the fact that the harvest reductions on the West Coast are meant to preserve and protect the Fraser River runs, and now we have the Big Bar Slide on the Fraser River. We know that now we just about lost everything on certain runs of Chinooks last year. So all of these closures, it seems like, may have been for nothing, even though the intent was good. When are we going to find out, and when can we get some information on whether or not these closures have actually done any good?
With regards to fisheries management decisions, of course, the Chinook salmon run specifically, there's more to it than just the management decisions that are going to make a difference in the salmon stocks. As I've said, this is not something that has one specific thing that's going to make all of the difference. It's about making sure that it has the right habitat. It's making, of course, Big Bar was something that nobody predicted was going to happen, that has had an impact on the stocks. So we are making sure that we're making the decisions based on science, and we're making sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to protect those stocks. And Deputy, I'm not sure if there's anything else there you would like to add.
Well, hang on here. I get a chance to talk to department officials all the time. Minister, I want to talk to you. So, Minister, you say that all of these things and the whole suite and the whole gambit, yet it seems to me that every time the department actually talks at committee or says the only management tool they have basically is fisheries closures. They basically say that. So, I mean, we've lost the hatcheries upstream of Big Bar Slide. We know that Quesnel, Eagle River, and so on have been abandoned. We have some community-based hatcheries that are up there. We know that there's active predation going on. The pinniped population on the West Coast has gone up significantly. There is now academic reports suggesting that maybe some active management of pinnipeds to ensure to ensure survival of Chinooks coming out of the Fraser River is something that's going to be necessary to do. Yeah, we're not talking about it. We're talking about the fisheries management regulations and so on. But we've shut down hatcheries. We're not actively managing predators. The only thing that we're doing is basically taking away resources from the people that make their livings on the West Coast without taking a look at these other things. So are we actually going to do something other than just fisheries regulations in order to preserve these valuable salmon stocks? Like, it's time to do something different, because what we're doing clearly isn't working.
I'm sorry, Minister. We've gone way over time on the question part, and don't leave any time for answers. So again, I'll ask if you can provide the answer to the committee in writing.
Thank
we would
you, Chair.
appreciate it. I would remind members that without the proper...
A point of order, please.
Madam Gill.
Regarding interpretation, given the low quality of sound, there was no interpretation for Mr. Calkins' points. I don't know if he has another headset. And if not, I would just like to ask that next time he would get one so that I can listen to all of the interventions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Madam Gill. I will say that I've been told that due to the fact that Mr. Calkins doesn't have the proper equipment or is not using the proper equipment, translation is not available. So I will remind people to try and use the proper equipment that's been recommended for this session. It has to be able to be translated for the convenience of all members of the committee. So again, if we run into the same thing again, somebody who has the right equipment may have to reread any question or statement from anybody that doesn't have the proper equipment. I just want to put that out there, but we will continue on now. We're getting nearer to the end, and we'll probably get through this one, and hopefully we can work on that malfunction on the next meeting. And now on to Mr. Weiler for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just touching on some of the questions of my colleague previously, what impact does the Big Bar Slide have on the Chinook fishery across BC?
I'm going to turn that over to the deputy, please.
Yeah, once again, Rebecca, if you can take that on.
So the species that are affected are the ones that that spawn above the Big Bar site. So there's some particular Chinook stocks, particularly, and sockeye for the most part. But the impact across the coast is fundamental because of the importance of those stocks from an ecosystem perspective. Southern resident killer whales use them and feed on them. They are important for fisheries. They're certainly very important for First Nations for food security reasons. And so while the Chinook don't represent the entire resource of Chinook in British Columbia, it is important to consider those particular fish, given that they're very important to the ecosystem and relied upon by a number of sectors, First Nations, the recreational commercial harvesters, as well as our whales. And so the implications are quite significant.
Thank you. My riding is home to the Pacific Science Enterprise Center, and I know at PSEC, researchers are studying the multiple factors that impact fish migration, physiology, and fate, and how this affects migration and reproductive success. Minister, I was hoping you could explain and elaborate on this whole of lifespan approach and how it helps in fisheries management.
For technical questions, I'm turning them over to my deputy.
Thanks, and it's a technical question, but it's a very good question because salmon have one of the most complicated life histories of any fish that we manage. We have to worry about what happens to them in freshwater. We have to worry about what happens to them as they go into the through coastal areas, and then we have to worry about them what happens in the ocean, and then on all the way back again. So you really do need to take that life cycle approach. It means we have to recognize that what happens in the ocean, which is probably the area we understand the least, quite frankly. We know there's climate change going on. We know there's acidification. That's why we've been looking at sending science missions to understand with our international partners as to what happens there. And then on the way back, as some have mentioned, there are some complex predation cycles as well, the interactions with sea lions and other potential predators like the SRKW themselves. And then we need to understand as they go up the river, what has been the impact of deforestation, for instance, land use practices that affects both the river, but also where they spawn. And things like water temperature, for instance, in the spawning areas can also be extremely important. So you have to put together all of these factors when you're modeling the salmon in order to understand why we're seeing some of these general trends and where that's going to go.
Absolutely. Thanks for that technical explanation. And one of my colleagues earlier mentioned the BC Salmon Restoration Innovation Fund, the BC SHRIF. And I'm wondering, Minister, if you could explain what role it plays in ensuring we have healthy stocks of Pacific salmon.
BC SHRIF Fund is one of the, it's a phenomenal program that allows communities to do enhancement, to work on coastal restoration, to work on habitat restoration. We have had great success with this program, working with the province of British Columbia, as well as a number of the First Nations communities as well, who are very active in making sure that the fish habitat is preserved and conserved. We want to make sure that we continue to do that. We've already allocated $70 million of the $148 million in BC SHRIF, as well as I think it's 29 projects so far. So the money is flowing to the communities, to the organizations that are doing this work. And I don't know, Deputy, if there's anything else there you'd like to add.
Maybe Rebecca, just a little bit more color.
Sure, yeah. So 192 expressions of interest. We've funded about $70 million have been allocated so far. There are a number of projects that will directly benefit these stocks in the Fraser River. And there's another funding round, going to be planned to come up relatively soon.
Great, thanks for that. And that leads directly into my next question, and that's how, if at all, has BC SHRIF programming been redirected to support efforts related to Big Bar and some of the stocks that have been impacted by the slide?
Deputy, I'm going to turn that one to you.
Yeah, again, Rebecca, I think you're close to that one on the ground.
Yes, so we have, as I just started to say, we have funded a number of activities, so habitat restoration, studies, actual, boots on the ground work that are directly benefiting these stocks. An example is the North Pacific survey that just came back, where they went out to the ocean to look at what's going on in the high seas. So there's a number of really great examples of how SHRIF has supported and helped advance the studies and work for these stocks. Certainly, we could provide a list as well to provide more detail if requested.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Waller. We'll now go to Mr. Fast for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much. And Minister, I appreciate you being here. We're asking tough questions, but it's important because I think you will acknowledge that our Pacific salmon do face an existential crisis, especially when we hear that some 99% of our runs are being lost. I mean, that is shocking. It should cause dismay amongst anybody who values our Pacific salmon. So I met with the Pacific Salmon Foundation in December, and in their estimation, harbor seals are consuming up to 45% of outgoing juvenile salmon. In other words, almost half of all the outgoing juveniles are gone before they ever get to maturity. That represents a real threat. And we're also hearing this on the East Coast, where gray seals have been identified by your department as a key factor in the decline of a number of species of fish. So can you tell us what you're doing about the threat posed by excessive predation? And I'm not talking about plans. I mean, this has been a problem for years. In fact, I would suggest it's a decades-long problem, and we need action on this. Do you have any specific action items to address this particular problem?
Sorry,
Minister?
I'm sorry, I do have a challenge sometimes unmuting. It's my computer, I think. I apologize. Thank you for the question. And Mr. Fast, you're absolutely right. The salmon is something that's absolutely critical to BC. And I don't mean just as a fish, as a food source or for commercial harvest, but to the very culture. And it's so much a part of the identity of British Columbians that it's a critical thing that we have to make sure that we protect and do everything we can to build those stocks back up. So with regards to predation, with regards to seals specifically, I will say that, there's a number of challenges with the seal population. We do make our decisions based on the best available science. There is ongoing science being done now to determine what is happening with the seals with regards to the fish stocks, both on the East Coast and the West Coast. I'm not sure if the deputy can add anything to that in terms of specific things that are being done, but I know that there is a great deal of work being done around the science in terms of seal predation.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty complicated issue, and of course, seals and various fish stocks have co-evolved, over millennia. And we need to understand the predator-prey interactions. Yes, seals can eat salmon, for instance, on the West Coast, or other species on the East Coast. But seals also eat fish like hake that also eat salmon. So, more seals can actually make life easier for salmon. It just depends where the seals are. Certainly, when we look at the diet of seals, certainly on the West Coast, salmon are not the main part of their diet. So we really do need to understand more about these interactions. There is a food and ceremonial hunt for seals on the West Coast. But before we can take action, we need to understand the situation better.
With respect to Mr. Sargent, the department has been discussing and studying predation for years. They know it's a problem, and soft pedaling this as an issue isn't going to help our salmon stocks on the West Coast. I really need to know what action is going to be taken to address predation, not only here on the West Coast. It is a huge issue on the East Coast, and especially our recreational fishers are getting very, very antsy when they see their fish being taken by seals before those fish can even be landed. You know, and I know that action needs to be taken now. It's not just about studying this endlessly without any action plan. So I'll go to a second question. Minister, is your department still planning to expand the pneumatic tube system to get the fish past the big bar slide? It's my understanding that there were two pathways that were initially established, and there's a concern, as my colleague Mel Arnold mentioned earlier, There's a concern about accommodating different sizes of salmon. Some of them are quite large, and I'm not sure they're going to make it through that tube. So your comments on that would be very helpful.
My understanding is that we have been working closely with the company that is building the pneumatic fish pump in order to accommodate the size of the fish that we have. That there are different size tubes that will be used, and that we have absolute confidence in the fact that they are able to make sure that we are going to be able to move our fish through the pneumatic system. And I don't know, Deputy, if there's anything else there.
Yeah, I would just say that this kind of fish is also moved using the WOOF system in Washington State.
Right. That includes large fish?
Yep.
Thank you,
All right,
Mr.
thanks.
Best. We'll go on now to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Watershed Watch people have had a lot to say in and around the whole Big Bar situation. And they said something curious. Mr. Calkins had brought up the whole issue of the hatcheries. And Aaron Hill, who's the executive director of Watershed Watch, as well as our old friend and colleague Finn Donnelly, we're talking about the growing pressure to get more hatchery fish produced. They say that's a really bad idea. Can anybody comment on that? Why would they think that's not a very good idea to look to hatchery fish to replenish the stocks?
So one of the things I think that needs to be kept in mind is what type of effect hatchery fish will have on wild salmon stocks. And I think that, the concern is that it would be a challenge for wild stocks, and it looks like we're giving up on wild stocks if we go with a large scale hatchery. Hatcheries do have a place, there's no question, in terms of helping the stocks, in terms of what we're doing, for example, at Big Bar, with regards to capturing the fish now and in the holding they're actually now in the holding area, so that we can maintain that stock. But we do recognize that there are a number of people that have real concerns about hatchery fish simply because of the impacts that they may have on the wild Pacific salmon. Deputy, I'm not sure if there's anything else there that.
Just to say, those people include many First Nations, for instance, who are quite concerned about the salmon stocks. And I think that there is certainly a worry here that the genetic diversity that's represented by our wild stock could be overwhelmed by large-scale enhancement, which isn't to say, as the Minister has said, that there isn't a place for enhancement of salmon on the West Coast.
But, it occurs that because the salmon are gathering just in front of the barrier, and I believe, actually, Minister, you referenced this a little earlier, that it was possible to, scoop some up and instead of moving them along, take them and involve them in hatchery operations, which should answer, the DNA issues, one would think.
So we're currently looking at a number of different measures, and of course the hatchery at the Upper Fraser is one option. It is already, like I said, we already are doing the holding facility there for them, because we want to make sure that we try and protect as many as we can. And if there's going to be a challenge for them getting through, making sure that we do have those genetic fish. But with regards to large scale hatcheries, there is very real concerns about mixing those with the wild Pacific salmon and the genetics involved there. It's a challenge for a lot of First Nations communities. It's a challenge with regards to for environmental groups. So those are all things we take into consideration. But making sure that the Chinook population in the Fraser right now is being looked at in a hatchery capacity, and we're working with a number of different organizations to see that works out.
You could try and assess the value of the efforts that have been made over a number of years, a number of governments to address the situation with salmon on the Fraser, and there have been no shortage of ideas, of advice, etc. But speak to us, Minister, about the conflicting advice, because it does not seem that you can really land on a consensus. Somebody says, well, you should do this, and somebody else comes along, like the hatcheries, and says, well, no, that's a terrible idea. What are we going to do to reach a consensus so that not only can we move forward with a doable plan, but it's a plan that can survive a change in government or a change in minister. Something that where we get some continuity and we actually move the needle.
Here we go. Sorry. That's actually a really good question. And, I think one of the things I will say is that we make all of our decisions based on science. It's something that we have, we're strongly committed to. We also, recognize that we need to work with a number of different groups. Honestly, consensus in fisheries is never easy to achieve, but I think it is possible because we all want the same thing. We all want the same outcome. And that's, we all want to see, better populations for the BC salmon. We all want to see them continue to grow in abundance. We want to make sure that they're there for generations to come. We want to be able to make sure that the southern killer right whales or the southern resident killer whales have a food supply. These are all things that we have to take into account. And the thing that we have to remember is that there is no one answer to making sure that those populations survive. There's a number of different things that need to be done. And hatcheries may play a role in that, but we also recognize that habitat restoration plays a role in that. Climate change plays a role in that. Clearing big bar plays a role in that. These are all things that we're working on right now to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to maintain those stocks, because once they're gone, they're not coming back. We need to make sure we do everything we can to keep them as resilient as they are right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Madam Gill, I understand you're sharing or giving your time to Mr. Johns for the next question time slot. So I'll go on to Mr. Johns for 5 minutes or less in total, sir. You have the floor.
Well, thank you. I misread you answered a question. You said there was 192 applications for the BC Shrift Fund. Can you tell through you, Mr. Chair? Is it do you have a total of how much value, the total of the value of those applications were to the Shrift Fund?
So for clarification, are you asking what the total was for the 192 applications that we had?
Yeah. What was the total in terms of?
Okay, I'm going to have to turn that to the deputy, or maybe.
Yeah, Rebecca, you've got those numbers.
You turned off your mic.
Rebecca, do you have that?
Yes, I'm sorry. There we go. Now the muting problem is mine. So the question, 192 proposals. Is the question how much money we spent?
No, how much was the total applications in value? Was it like 100 million, 200 million?
No, it was about 300. I think it was around 340 odd million dollars.
Right.
It was very significant.
So it was way oversubscribed. And one thing that there is consensus on is that, with Indigenous communities, local governments, recreation fishers, commercial, is that we need more money spent on restoration, habitat protection. You talked about climate change and the impact of it. A lot of these projects would be climate mitigation projects. You've approved $70 million in applications when the ask was on the first round $340 million. In my writing, there's groups like Coastal Restoration Society, Indigenous communities that got rejected, West Coast Aquatic, all with great projects. And certainly in the Fraser, it's the same thing. So my ask is the government looking at ramping this up significantly, in light of the situation with our wild salmon, which is getting way worse, especially with big bar?
Thank you, Mr. Johns, for the question, and Mr. Chair, through you. I would say that, we're continuing to monitor situations. We're continuing to look at what needs to be done. I don't know the applications that came through that were rejected. I'm not really sure why. There may have, everyone has a criteria that they do have to meet. We have actually committed $70 million. It's a $148 million fund. So there is still another intake of applications that will be coming forward. Perhaps, the deputy has something else he can add there. But I know that we are working to get the money out the door as quickly as we can.
It sounds to me like you've approved just over 20% of the overall intake, the ask. Clearly, this program isn't adequate to serve the needs of coastal people. This is something we're hearing from the Skeena to the Fraser, Clayoquot, you name it. Every watershed is asking for money, and these are thousands and thousands of volunteers, mainly recreation fishers, commercial fishers, Indigenous communities. Most of them are volunteers. They want to go out and do this work, but they can't do it without some resources. What is the government going to do to mobilize really a volunteer workforce, a group of people that want to go out and help with restoration and habitat protection? Because I think this is an opportunity being wasted, especially coming out of COVID. This could be a COVID response and COVID recovery initiative that could transform coastal British Columbia and save our wild, iconic salmon.
So we've committed $148 million under a 2-year time frame. We've spent $70 million of that, so we still have another $78 million to go. We have approved a number of projects. Deputy, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything else. We know that there's more that needs to be done. We know that there's a lot of good projects out there, and we're working very diligently to make sure that we address as many of them as we possibly can.
Yeah, maybe just to add to that. First, in terms of the oversubscription, certainly there are a number of criteria that people have to meet. They have to have a proper plan, and we're not just going to give money to anybody who asks for it. There are terms and conditions. And I would say as well, this is a program that we run in partnership with the province of British Columbia. So they also have to be satisfied that the money is going to go to good use. This is not the only money that we spend on habitat restoration. For the Coastal Restoration Fund, for instance, about 40% of that $75 million went on BC salmon, on the BC salmon projects. We also have a number of other things that we do with groups, volunteer groups, with restoration biologists.
I appreciate it, but for the record, and our party wants to see that tripled at least, because communities throughout the whole coast are getting denial letters for very good projects, and they could do their part to help bring back our wild salmon. Restoration and habitat protection has to be the number one priority for the West Coast for this government. Salmon's our economy, our food security, our culture, and it's having a massive impact on coastal communities. And this is an opportunity, and I'm just calling on the government to do that. And I hope that Big Bar hasn't diverted projects away from good projects throughout the coast. As Mr. Wheeler asked, a fair question never got an answer to. So I just want to follow up on that. Are any projects being diverted or postponed because of Big Bar?
Perhaps, Minister, I can take that on. So the answer to that is no. The money that we've used for Big Bar has come from a special allotment that we've got from the centre. It has not been taken away from other programs.
Thank you. I just again want to reiterate the sense of urgency here. Thank you.
Your time is up. I want to say a special thank you to the Minister and the officials for being here today. I understand some of them will be back again tomorrow, so we look forward to seeing you then. I'll give the officials and the guests a chance to sign off now before we have a short statement to make to the committee.
Thank you all.
Merci.
Okay, I believe most are gone now. I just wanted to mention that I wanted to say a big thank you on behalf of the clerk and the staff for the members getting to the meeting, for submitting the names of the witness so promptly last week, the suggested witness list for tomorrow's meeting as well. So a big thank you for that. As well, if all members are okay with this, I would suggest that tomorrow's meeting with the Minister and the officials be considered under Mr. Arnold's motion to invite the Minister, but also under Ms. Gill's motion to study the impacts of COVID. So if everybody is okay with that, because I think it might be a slim chance of getting the Minister back for another session. We're going to have our early officials again tomorrow to deal with COVID-19. So if that's okay with everybody. And just one more reminder again about please try and sign on early. We want people to be able to do a test on the sound and the mics and the interpretation to be able to do that. And as well, if somebody doesn't have the right equipment, it's unfair to Madame Gill and others, and even to the interpreters, that if they can't understand what's being said because of not up-to-date equipment or not appropriate equipment, it is unfair for the meeting to be even in progress. So we're going to try and get strict on that going forward. Everybody should be able to understand what's being said and partake in the meeting going forward, and I want to make sure that happens. So again,
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Fast.
If I could just raise one issue which came up during this meeting, and that is the suggestion that all questions have to be put through the chair. Is that correct? Because it has certainly not been the practice in any committee work I've done over my 14 years. We ask questions directly of the witnesses, and I think it's implied that we're doing that through the chair. But I'd hate for that to become a formal process because it just slows the process down. Yes, go ahead.
If I could, I've always assumed that if you were asking a question to a minister or a guest, it was gone through the chair by simply asking it. And it's a bit harder now, I guess, Mr. Fast, where we're not in the same room.
Yeah.
And it makes it a bit more difficult, I guess. And maybe the intent is to make sure the chair is controlling what's going on. But for the most part, I agree with you that the questions, they can hear it as well as I can. So it's no need of saying through you, Mr. Chair, or to you, Madam Chair, whatever, at any time. I understand the question is going to the person that it's intended to. And most of us identify who we want to answer it. If it's the minister or an official or another witness per se. So
yeah, Mr. Chair, that's no lack of respect for you. Trust me. You're doing a really good job. But I did want to add the second part of that, and that was Minister Jordan suggested that she basically has the right to answer questions within any time frame that suits her. And again, that is not correct. The time we have to ask questions is ours as members of the committee. Even in the House itself, or the committee, the COVID committee, as you know, the length of the question reflects the length of the answer that's allowed, and the speaker cuts off the person who's answering once that time has expired. I like the idea of being able to preserve our time respectfully. I mean, if you're asking a question, the minister needs to have time enough to respond. But if it's very clearly a yes or no answer, I don't appreciate witnesses running out the time so they can avoid other questions. That I don't think would be fair to committee. I don't think it's fair to the parliamentary process. So I'm in your hands, obviously, but I just wanted to express those concerns.
Yeah, I agree to some extent, Mr. Fast, and I do at times allow time for an answer when the time is ran out. I try to be as lenient as I can, but everyone has to remember the time for questions is your time. Each individual participant and committee member, that is your time. If you don't think you're getting the answer, interject at any time, and that goes for any member. But I also like to be respectful of the person trying to answer a question, but I understand fully what you're saying.
Okay.
So if there's nothing further, I'll call the meeting adjourned and look forward to seeing everybody again tomorrow.
Thank you.
Cheers.